And we're live. Welcome, everyone, to the Two Bros Wrestling Show at the end of Survivor Series. Survivor Series means two things. It means it's Thanksgiving, and it also means that it's Doug's time of year where he does seasonal work. Therefore, he's not available tonight, once again, spending his Thanksgiving season as our local mall's gobbledygooker. So hopefully he'll be able to return soon. But in the meantime, I'm Kevin, and happy to say with us once again, David Poole, friend of the show. Thanks, David, for joining us for 2 straight weeks now.
Thanks again for having me. I'm happy to be here, especially while Doug's dealing with his legal issues, community service, mall work, whatever he needs to do. But we want him back as soon as possible.
I appreciate you stepping in and staying up late. At least you're in Central Time Zone here on the East Coast. Man, we're going towards midnight at the end of Survivor Series. It was a bit of a long one this evening, but are you ready to talk some Survivor Series with the folks?
Let's do it.
I'm ready. As you know, we always start out by talking about the show in general. So if you didn't see Survivor Series, we're not going to give you spoilers just yet. We'll warn you before we get there. But just overall, David, if you were to recommend or not recommend, what would you give this pay-per-view if you were telling somebody if they need to catch it or not?
You know, if you're a wrestling fan, there's never going to be a show that I would say don't waste your time. I mean, go ahead and give it a watch. But you know, as far as comparing this one to Survivor Series past years, it probably doesn't rank near the top, but it's still one worth watching, and there was a few really good matches in there.
For me, this one was definitely more of a thumbs in the middle. Not an overall, like you can't say it was a dud of a show and not worth watching. I would say that if you didn't watch it live and you're wanting to know whether or not you need to see it, watch the rest of our show and we'll tell you which matches you need to see. But really, if you watch the beginning and the end, you're probably going to be okay and see all that there is to see. So me, thumbs middle, maybe trending a little down just because, to your point, David, it's not nearly as eventful as one we expected it to be. And we'll get into that as we go through our detailed look. And not really quite as many top level matches that we maybe have seen in the past.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned on the last episode about how, you know, Survivor Series just doesn't seem to carry the same weight because there's not really a lot of things at stake. And I honestly felt this year and previous years that I feel like it being brand versus brand kind of hurts it too. I kind of miss the old days of it being, you know, baby faces versus heels, and now you get kind of a mixture of guys, heels and faces on the same team that don't get along very well. And I think to me it hinders it a little, but it was still an entertaining event.
And it led to some interesting booking choices because of those dynamics that you just mentioned. And with that, folks, you got two guys here saying that, yeah, you should watch it, but maybe watch it on fast forward. And now we're going to go into the spoiler territory. And if you did watch the show, please feel free to jump in and let us know what you think about the matches we're getting ready to discuss. David, did you happen to catch the pre-show?
I didn't. I saw what the result of the opening match was, but I did not catch the pre-show.
So I'll give a quick recap of the pre-show match that took place for those that maybe also didn't get to see it. And for you, I'd say definitely, David, go back and watch it because the pre-show match actually was better than some of the things that ended up on the actual pay-per-view. But for those that did not see it in our pre-show, we had Shinsuke Nakamura, your Intercontinental Champion, taking on U.S. Champion Damian Priest. David, you and I called this one, predicted last week, both of us, I think, for Priest. And that isn't the way that it went down. The winner was Nakamura, but it was by DQ. So I think that we both get an out on that one because technically it was Priest that was standing tall at the end of the match. He just didn't have the victory. This one was really more about what was going on the outside of the ring. I do think that in a lot of ways, Rick Boogs sort of overshadows Nakamura's character, which is kind of unfortunate. Dave, this one had a bit of a cool start from the crowd, and I think it goes to what you were just referring to, the idea of it being face versus face. And so the crowd really didn't seem to know at first who they should get behind. They eventually got into the match, but at first it seemed like they were just kind of sitting, waiting for that reason to invest. And that reason ended up being Damian Priest going outside and attacking Rick Boogs, which is what caused the DQ. David, I don't know. Does Damian Priest attacking Rick Boogs make him a heel now, or more of a face?
It seems like kind of a heel move, but I mean, I guess he could be kind of a tweener. I mean, I guess we'll see what he looks like on Raw. But even when you just said that, it was kind of a surprise to me. I was like, yeah, that's a little bit of a heel turn.
It's a bit of a heel turn, except for the fact that it's Rick Boogs. So I guess your mileage on what you think of the Boogs gimmick is whether or not you love Priest even more now or not. I will say it was a stiff shot with a guitar. And unlike the traditional wrestling guitar, maybe someone should tell Damian Priest that, guitar shots back from the old, Jeff Jarrett days, it's always with an acoustic, not with an electric to the face. So that one looked a little tough there. So Nakamura gets the victory, but does it so the hard way. That was your pre-show match. Again, Dave, pretty solid match. Got the crowd invested overall. So if you get a chance and the folks at home get a chance, definitely check that out. Better than some of the matches actually on the main pay-per-view, which we're going to get to now. David, first match of the actual pay-per-view. Were you, before we even get into who it was and who won, were you surprised that this was the first match?
No. I think they try to have the opening match lately be a good match. I feel like lately with the pay-per-views, they don't open up with one that we don't care about. So I'm not surprised at all that they started with it.
See, I actually thought this was going to be the main event. I figured that this one had so much heat behind it and was probably the match that a lot of people seem to be looking the most forward to, that they might hold it till last. The fact that they put it on first did make me think they wanted to start off hot, but also made me think, aha, there is going to be a special guest showing up in that final match, and that's why they're saving it for last. We won't spoil whether or not that special guest arrived or not. Let's talk about what happened in this first match, Dave. Flair versus Becky Lynch. We both predicted this one correctly.
Yeah. I guess we'll get there. I mean, it didn't really end the way I hoped or thought it would end, but yeah, we did call it.
And the fact that Becky Lynch walked away with a victory in some ways may be a little bit of a political nod to, a very slight punishment because the way it ended up going down, but maybe with the real life situation behind this contest, Charlotte Flair took a bit of a bit of a punishment by being the one booked to have her shoulders pinned tonight. But the match itself, Dave, from the get-go, great costumes. I liked the way that I loved Flair's real heelish robe that she had on, looked very evil queenish. And then Becky Lynch comes out looking like a superhero, which was pretty cool. And they had a really hot start, I thought. I thought that they really did a good job of showing that, I guess, with the winking knowledge that we all know what actually is going on behind the scenes, I think they really played up the fact that, hey, this could really turn into a shoot at any given moment now. So we got to make it look stiff and look like they really hate each other. So it wasn't like they started exchanging tests of strength. They just immediately went at, hair pulling and slapping and intensity like you'd hope.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much of the heat between those two is real and how much might have been played up a little bit. I mean, I know Charlotte has some heat right now within the WWE. There's a part of me that wants to believe that these two haven't split as much in real life as they played on TV, but they're convincing and making it seem that there's real heat, whether there is or not. So I mean, that definitely made the match a lot more interesting.
It made it more interesting, and then by the end of it, it also made me start to wonder if we all were being played. Much to your point, it's like, are we just being worked? Was it really as big of a backstage issue between the two of them as we've been led to believe, or was it all just to sell this match, which, again, they did do very successfully?
Yeah, as I was watching this match, I mean, it was a great match, and I really thought, even though this was the very first match on the card, that it, was a contender for possibly being match of the night. I wasn't at all happy with how they finished it. I mean, I think the winner was the right winner, but I never like seeing matches end that way on a pay-per-view. I mean, I feel like it's fine to see that on Raw, it's fine to see that on SmackDown, but on a pay-per-view, I hate it.
Yeah, I thought it was a bit of a cheap finish, and maybe it was a politically negotiated finish where, yes, Charlotte, you have to take the pin, but we're not going to make you look too bad. So this saves you a little face, maybe protects you a bit. I don't know that at this point a 14-time world champion Hall of Famer, like the future Hall of Famer, I guess, like the Charlotte Flair, needs protection like that. For those that didn't see it and maybe aren't going to go back and watch it, what David is referring to is that there was a roll-up attempt with Charlotte Flair grabbing the ropes. The referee catches her trying to get that extra leverage, makes her break. There's a follow-up roll-up by Becky, who does the exact same thing, except she didn't get caught, and she was smart enough to wait and make sure the referee wasn't looking before she grabbed the rope. So that part was a little bit of a nice touch that, I'm going to cheat too, but I'm going to cheat smarter than you did. But maybe a little too clever by half. I don't know. I know we'd said before, though, with the first match, it was face versus face. We should point out this was heel versus heel, but there was no doubt who the crowd was behind. They were not torn in this one.
Yeah, and I was also just a little bit disappointed with after the match ended. It seemed like the loss didn't really bother Charlotte all that much. She left the ring smiling. I would have liked to have seen her be kind of pissed off and maybe a post-match attack, but that never happened.
Yeah, you almost wonder too with everything that's happening in supposedly happening. If we're what we're hearing, if we're being led to believe that is really true with her attitude backstage, if that reaction is just her no selling something that she should have maybe been selling as meaning more to her, because she's supposedly been very difficult, not just Becky, but to a lot of the other female talent backstage. And maybe she should have shown more anger and just chose not to, and break character that way. Again, I'm sure we might be just being played into thinking that, just so that they maybe can extend this a little bit further into her character and maybe her next feud with maybe, it looks like it might be Sasha down the road. But who knows? All in all, great match, though. And I would say it is my match of the night, despite the ending. But definitely one that I'd say that everybody needs to see, and definitely one of the most noteworthy things that happened this evening. Moving on to match number 2, Dave, we have the men's Raw team against the SmackDown Raw team, and traditional elimination style rules on this one. David, do you remember last week who when you asked me, I thought the sole survivor might be who I said?
I believe you did say Seth Rollins.
I do believe I did. So, maybe that isn't a little bit of an obvious pick, but hey, I want to give myself credit for that one. I think we both picked the right team, but Seth standing tall at the end probably is a good move as far as booking goes. The match itself, it really is going to depend what you think of this one, is what you think about the Survivor Series concept to begin with. I put in my notes here, David, that you could probably watch an entire episode of 205 Live in the amount of time it took for all the introductions to take place. There's a reason this late at night, because it was the elimination style matches really add a lot of time to the show, and the intros for everybody do not help. KO did the typical Survivor Series thing where you have an elimination that happens way too quickly to be believable, to try to cut down on the time of these matches. KO might have took the record on that one, though.
Yeah, I mean, I knew something was going to happen with him, where he was either going to just bail completely or he was going to attack his whole team. But, for time, they probably went the right way with that.
KO walked away, but he didn't wait around to do it. He started off the match and immediately walked to the back, got counted out. There's your first elimination within 10 seconds of the match starting. Lashley, I thought looked really strong. David, I don't know if you thought anybody particularly stood out in this one, but for me, I think an Austin Theory, as someone who doesn't have the pedigree of all the other men in the match, for him to last as long as he did and even get a pinfall on Sheamus, I think speaks well for maybe what they plan on doing with him.
Yeah, I think the sky's the limit for Austin Theory, and I was kind of surprised that they yanked him from Raw after his first run, because I feel like he's got a whole lot of upside. They sent him back to NXT for a little while, and he did a great job there again on his second run at NXT. But yeah, I think he's a future main eventer for sure.
And they positioned him well tonight, so that might bode well for that actually being something that occurs. I said Lashley looks strong. Obviously, he has a history with Drew McIntyre. They played into that history during the course of the match. That ends up in a double countout situation, which again, kind of a cheap way to get guys out of the match, but is very in line with what they oftentimes do with Survivor Series. Another reason why I'm not always that crazy about the elimination style matches, sort of some cheap eliminations. But overall, the crowd seemed to like this one. And that's not necessarily going to be the case moving forward, because there is a point in time we're going to get to here, David. I don't know if you noticed this too, that the crowd starts to check out. And I think it's probably during this next match.
During the one after the elimination.
After the elimination match.
Mm.
The 25-man anniversary Rock / Pizza Hut's Battle Royal. I'm not really sure what all to say about this. I guess the concept behind this one is you have one winner, and the other 24 men, I believe, just got their releases at the end of.
Yeah, I was going to say they probably should have just called it the Future Endeavored Battle Royal, because I think it's probably a good chance if WWE continues on the pace that they've been going, probably half of these guys won't have a job with WWE in 6 months.
I thought the same as I'm looking at the participants of this one. Like, man, there is a lot of future endeavors in this contest.
And it was only a few away from being really a tag team battle royal, because I want to say out of like the 25 people in there was only like 6 or 7 that weren't part of a duo.
And to me too, though, David, this is not only was this match kind of a waste. I mean, we didn't predict this one because we didn't even know about it when we did our show last week. That's how last minute this seems kind of thrown together as sort of just a way to sell pizza, apparently. But to me, this kind of also exposes the fallacy, I guess, behind the whole concept of the elimination matches. Because in this one, you have guys in Raw shirts, guys in SmackDown shirts, and they're still just everybody for themselves, because no one really cares to help out somebody else on Raw or somebody else on SmackDown. Heels attack faces, faces attack heels, or if you're wanting a prize of some sort, you attack everybody. And this just goes to show why those 2 elimination matches mean even less, I guess, when you put this match, kind of squeeze it in there in between those 2. It just highlights the fact that, yeah, no one cares about brand supremacy, not the wrestlers, not the fans. Omos won this one. I guess we should say who actually won this contest. So they did the whole, Andre the Giant kind of like battle royal thing from years past. So I guess this now means that WWE considers Omos the next Rock. Is that the way we're supposed to?
Doubtful. I mean, they definitely want to portray him as a beast. But I mean, I think. I mean, it's obvious that this whole battle royal was pointless and it didn't need to be there in the first place. But I think even trying to push Omos like this, I feel like is kind of a waste of time, because I don't want to get too far ahead of the game here. But I feel like this whole relationship with him and AJ Styles, it ends with those 2 eventually turning on each other, having a match. AJ wins, and then within 6 months, Omos is probably gone.
I try to look at it glass half full. I thought it was just a waste of a match, but I thought if there is one thing that they may do just for the sake of storyline, is to further along an eventual AJ Omos breakup, and maybe pre-position Omos as a threat for the upcoming Royal Rumble. He could hang his hat for the next month and a half on this night where he eliminated 12 men. He eliminated half the field. So take away the fact that it wasn't a good match. If you're just looking at it on paper and reading a description, you have a giant in a Royal Rumble or in a a battle royal style matchup who eliminates half of the opponents, that is impressive enough that they could make that a storyline thing for him. Of course, when the crowd is chanting "We want pizza," it probably doesn't mean they're that invested in what's going on in the ring.
Well, and how do you think the fans really felt about having pizza thrown at them at the end of that match? I mean, I kind of feel like if I want something thrown at me, I don't want a greasy slice of pizza thrown at me, but that's just me.
I guess it depends on how hungry you are and who did the throwing. I don't think when Sami Zayn started throwing pizza in the middle of the match that they cared as fans cared as much for it, but they were chanting "We want pizza." So I think at that point they would rather have a dirty slice of greasy pizza slung at them than to watch Omos lumber about for a minute more than what we had to endure this evening.
That's for sure.
I will say that the David versus Goliath finish at the end, where the last two men were Omos and Ricochet. I thought they were going to do a little more with that and let Ricochet do rope spots in, but it was pretty much just a straight squash. If a battle royal can be considered a squash.
Yeah, there was definitely a big part of me that wanted Ricochet to pull the upset there, but I had a feeling that wasn't going to be the case.
No, it wasn't the case at all. Moving on ahead, we have the SmackDown Tag Team Champions taking on the Raw Tag Team Champions. So you have the Usos versus RK Bro. David, we got this one wrong. Both of us thought it was going to be the Usos night, and this was definitely one for RK Bro and clean. I mean, it wasn't like it was a cheap finish. It was actually one of the better finishes of the night as far as not having the letdown at the end. I think that after the two matches that preceded it, this is where it started to pick back up a bit. But I don't know that at that point, even though the action was good, I'm not sure they won the crowd back just yet. It took a little bit of time. I do think that the air kind of went out of the room in the long elimination match and then the pointless battle royal.
Absolutely, yeah. It was a good match. I mean, I feel like you said, it was a great finish. There was no interference, and I guess Randy's got a pretty good track record as far as pay-per-views go. So maybe we should have called it the other way. But
yeah, when he came out with his new remixed version of his song, I thought, you're not going to come out with a new remix and lose.
Yeah, and when Randy and Riddle took this match, it really made me realize that they were getting real close to another Raw sweep too. So it kind of gave me an indicator of who was going to win a couple of the matches to come.
It was interesting, though several interesting things happened in this match. I thought it was interesting when Pat McAfee, and sometimes I think Pat may not be as tightly scripted as the other guys, or he's just still naive and new enough that he just kind of goes off on tangents without having them pre-approved, because they don't really talk about OVW anymore. And he went on a long Ohio Valley wrestling rant, which surprised me. And I'm thinking, man, he's probably getting yelled at in his ear set. And if that didn't do it, it was not a minute later that he actually mentioned the referee by name, which breaks a WWE edict that referees don't have names and you're not supposed to acknowledge their existence beyond the ref, lowercase. So I imagine Pat got a little bit of a talking to for both of those things. There was a badly missed spot in this otherwise pretty solid match where Riddle did try to hit a knee, and Jey Uso did not come anywhere close to the knee, but sold it anyway. So that it got a little bit sloppy, but overall they definitely won the crowd over by the end, because I really do think the crowd had kind of been killed by the previous two matches. So it was good work by these four. I'm not necessarily the biggest Randy fan, but man, that RKO can still look great, and he has so many inventive ways that he can get into it and pull off. And this was one of the more unique ones. For those that didn't see it, we have an Uso coming in for the splash, and Randy intercedes with the RKO. Riddle still gets part of the splash because Riddle's still down there on the ground. But man, that looked pretty sweet.
Yeah, absolutely. And he seems to find a new way to do that every single pay-per-view. You mentioned not being a huge Randy fan. I don't consider myself a huge Randy fan either, but I feel like he is one of the most consistent and solid guys that the WWE has for sure. And every match he's in is a fun one to watch.
And he's been doing it for a while now, so I guess you're right. We probably shouldn't be so quick to discount him when he. Well, in our defense, I know last week when I thought the Usos were going over, I thought Riddle was definitely getting the pin because I thought Randy just doesn't lose very often. I should have discounted the fact that he was actually going to win. If nothing else, this is something else for Roman to be upset about on SmackDown with his cousins, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. And this was I want to say 4 straight for Raw. So I mean, like I said earlier, at this point in the event, you start wondering: is Raw going to take every single match just like they did last year?
I will admit that I'm surprised when you and I were kind of texting back and forth. That's when like it dawned on me. I'm like, oh wow, I didn't even realize we were on the verge of seeing Raw sweep again. Again. Spoiler, they don't, but it was definitely a Raw dominant night, and I'm kind of surprised they went that direction because that kind of takes us into our next match where I'm pretty sure that last week when I was saying how hard these elimination matches are to predict, I thought at the very least they'll split them, one to Raw, one to SmackDown. That didn't happen. Raw won both the elimination matches again. Women's match is the next match, folks. The SmackDown women's team against the Raw women's team, and it was a Raw women's victory, Dave.
Yeah, and it came from being down 4-1. So they put Bianca over something huge.
And once again, just like the men's match, this one started off as with one of the elimination style, unrealistic, quick endings where Carmella had some sort of mishap with her mask, and I'm not sure that went as planned because that was very awkward and it didn't come across all that well. But she was gone within the first couple of minutes of the match. Then, of course, Sasha and Shotzi began to disintegrate on the outside, and that's when you could sort of start to see where this was going. As far as where this was going, this also was starting to show where it was a long night and that the crowd, while really hot with the beginning match, just had a difficult time getting back into this one because they began doing the wave and only got back into the match once Bianca and Sasha ended up in the ring against one another. And we had that, sort of visual callback to WrestleMania. And that's really the first point in the match. And really since early on in the night that the crowd started to get fully invested again. But it didn't last long.
Yeah, I was going to say I must have a longer attention span than the crowd there did because I actually thought it was a pretty good Survivor Series, elimination match as far as they go. I mean, you have your kind of odd eliminations that happen just for the sake of time. But I mean, as far as historically, I thought it was a decent women's elimination match. I would have liked to have seen Liv Morgan last a little bit longer just because she's soon to be getting a title shot against Becky, so I would have liked to have seen a stronger performance from her, but I knew that they would make Bianca Belair look really good.
And the crowd really loves Liv, so I'm kind of surprised by that too. I was also, I guess, surprised that Toni Storm came across looking as strong as she did. She got a couple of eliminations and actually did a lot more in this elimination match than she's done up to this point in her history on SmackDown itself. So I thought that was a little bit of an odd booking. Not that I'm opposed to it. I think she's fantastic.
Yeah, I love Toni Storm, so it was good for me to see.
It was just odd, I think, considering how they had positioned her up to this point. I can't overlook the fact, though. I know you said you have a better attention span maybe than the crowd because not only, David, did they do the wave, there was a really strong CM Punk chant that just started out of nowhere. And again, I think it's just because at this point the crowd sort of checked out of the match, which was not really fair to the effort being put in by the ladies in the ring. But once it got down to Bianca honestly being a 1-on-4 situation, and then SmackDown team started turning on itself, and they had the cheap finish to get Sasha out of there, you could sort of see where this one was probably going to go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. When it became 4-1, I was like, I guess that I'm that dumb fan that was like, oh, there's no way she can come back from 4-1. How could this possibly happen? And then of course the team implodes.
Well, when it was 3-1 is when I thought, okay, now I know which way it's going to go. 4-1, I'm with you. But as soon as Sasha got eliminated because the team started to turn on itself, wrestling is the only sport where a 3-on-1 is actually in the advantage of the one, because that's when it became like, oh yeah, she's going to run the table, and sure enough, she did. But probably, I mean, considering the year she's had, probably the right choice. If you're going to have a one woman as a sole survivor standing tall, you definitely could do a lot worse than Bianca Belair after the year she's had.
Yes, for sure. And I think they're going to continue to make her looking strong going forward, and it won't be that long before she has a belt again.
And then that takes us, David, to our final match of the night, the main event. It's nearing 11 o'clock on the East Coast, and introductions were still happening. So we knew this pay-per-view was going to be going long, but we had Roman Reigns taking on Raw's champion Big E. And I know, folks, you're going to be surprised to hear this, but Roman Reigns has still not gotten pinned in almost 500 days. David, what did you think of this match?
This one, as we kind of said before the show, it had surprises in the fact that there were no surprises, but this was really my match of the night. I mean, I expected more at the end of the event. I was surprised that there was no appearances, no run-ins, no Usos, no Lesnar, no Rock, no anything. But I do think this is probably one of the best matches I've ever seen Big E in, despite the fact that he lost.
So there was rumors beforehand, not just rumors as to who was going to show up, but the scuttlebutt in the news today was last-minute changes prior to the pay-per-view. And supposedly the women were booked to finish this one. And at the last minute, it was decided to switch them to the opening match and put the men on last. And to me, when I heard that news that they got shifted, the first thing that came into my mind was then they're obviously going to deliver on some sort of surprise ending, and that's why the men go on last. Because as good as the match was, there's no doubt that there was a lot more story behind Charlotte and Becky. So I thought there has to be another reason they're doing this. And they did a lot of teases. There was a lot of talk of Brock Lesnar, the idea that his suspension is not indefinite any longer. And, you thought you might see him. They made a huge deal on The Rock being the 25th anniversary of him. There's a tie-in with The Rock's movie as a sponsor of the show. There was, Roman Reigns did interviews this week on the Tonight Show, where he was asked specifically, hey, rumors are The Rock's showing up. Is that true? And he's like, oh, I can't say. And so there was, honestly, to me, it was almost a no-brainer that, okay, The Rock's showing up, and especially once they moved it to the end. So I think that if anybody is disappointed in this match, it's not because of the quality of the match so much as they really overplayed their hand in making us think something was going to happen and then didn't deliver.
They spent 2 or 3 minutes talking about Lesnar before the match even started. So by the time the match was over, it was a great match. I loved the match, but I hear Michael Cole say, "Thanks everybody for watching," and I'm like, "Wait, that's it?" Yeah. Like, isn't there going to be more? Somebody's music has got to hit eventually, right? Like, nothing.
I thought that was another red herring. I thought, oh, okay, they're going to act like they're getting ready to sign off because now, as he's saying that, Reigns' back is to the entrance, and this is where it happens. And then they actually just went off the air, which was like, that's a bit surprising. It wasn't my match of the night. I thought it got to a point that it was really good, and they won the crowd back finally after them being quiet for a while. But it got off to a methodical start, which is not necessarily a bad thing. The announcers kept referring to it, in fact, about the methodical pace, and I thought, okay, they're pacing themselves for a longer match. It took them a little longer to get to that next gear, but once they got there, they had the crowd. The crowd really started to rally for Big E's comeback, I thought. And once that happened is when the rest of the whole match started to pick up. I thought there was a really great show of strength for Roman Reigns taking a guy the size of Big E in a one-arm power bomb. That looked fantastic. Then, of course, by the time Roman Reigns does the rock bottom again, you're thinking, here it comes. And it didn't. Big E firing up there, though, not going down to all those Superman punches might have been the highlight of the match for me. I know it was simple, and it wasn't like it was a complicated move set or a bunch of flip.
He was hulking up. He was hulking up after each one.
it was just great drama, and the crowd ate it up because the crowd loves Big E, and you knew he was going to lose. And like I said, to me, it took maybe a little longer than I expected to reach that next gear, but the next gear it reached. I think then at that point, once we invested in that, I was watching the match and no longer thinking about what was going to happen afterwards. It was only at the end of the contest when the 1, 2, 3 hit that I started to look around and wait for what the real ending of the pay-per-view was. And in that regard, I think that maybe WWE maybe hinted around too much to Lesnar and Rock and to not deliver either one of them. Probably going to send some folks home disappointed.
Yeah, and you mentioned, him, eating those Superman punches. I also love that he got at least one kick out from the spear, and I thought his spear onto Reigns going through the top and middle ropes onto the floor was it made me wince. It looked like it hurt, and it was an awesome spot to see.
That's always one of my favorite Big E moves when he does that to the outside. And it looks even more impressive when you do it on a man the size of Roman Reigns. And agree, it looked like he had a little extra oomph behind that one tonight. But overall, I thought that it's definitely a show worth seeing. But if you're short on time, it's nothing that blew me away. First and last match were definitely bookended by the better contest of the night, in my opinion. I just think it's really tough when you have, as we said from the get-go and last week, there's not really stakes. So it all depends on what happens in reaction. And when you only have two that maybe, perform to the level that people expect and a couple of others decent ones, I guess maybe even more so coming on the heels of an AEW pay-per-view that was so critically acclaimed. Then WWE goes into their final pay-per-view of the year, and you're expecting a big surprise, that doesn't happen. And then, people chanting for pizza and CM Punk and doing the wave. Not a good look.
Should we address the bizarre storyline regarding the $100 million golden egg? I don't know what that was all about. I'm guessing we're going to see more about that on Raw since somebody stole it, but it just seemed like a ridiculous time filler. And I honestly didn't really think it was a good idea for Vince to be as prominently shown as he was so shortly after another round of releases. But it is what it is. I don't know what the whole thing with the egg was about, but I guess we'll find out more on Monday.
So, and it is a tie-in to the movie Red Notice. It is apparently it's a plot point in the movie. I haven't seen the movie, so I didn't know that until I saw an advertisement for the movie, and Ryan Reynolds is there with that same egg. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what they're. At first, I thought it was a gobbledygooker reference to the egg that happened. Series all those years ago, I'm glad you brought it up because I almost forgot about it. Maybe I'm wanting to forget about it because again, you have AEW who put on two of the better pay-per-views of the entire year in their last two pay-per-views, and you have a old and out of touch Vince McMahon on his last pay-per-view featuring himself prominently with a storyline about an egg that is apparently going to continue tomorrow night on Raw.
Who, Kevin, do you think stole the egg? I mean, it's going to be a hot question. Who took the egg?
It's going to be a hot question because apparently both Raw and SmackDown talent are all supposed to report tomorrow night to be investigated and interviewed. So if that at all interests you folks, definitely tune in. But it is really hard when AEW is just killing it the way that it is. To review some of this stuff with a straight face and not think that Vince McMahon is somewhat out of touch with what the modern wrestling fan wants when that is the one of the hooks coming out of the pay-per-view.
Yeah, overall, I feel like this Survivor Series wasn't a horrible event, but considering that this is one of WWE's original big four to go along with WrestleMania and Royal Rumble and SummerSlam, it's kind of disappointing to see how far they've fallen with these kind of events. I mean, this used to be a really, really big deal, and it doesn't feel like a big deal anymore.
No, it doesn't. And, I don't mind the idea of champion versus champion with nothing on the line other than, which champion's better. That's fine. But the elimination matches and then to the multiple person matches are so chaotic anyway, and then to dilute that even further by throwing in a pointless 25-man battle royal was just way too much of the meaningless. And then you throw in the storyline of the egg, and you really do need to, if you didn't watch this one live, just fast forward to that opening match and that ending match, because that will restore your faith in wrestling, and over sometimes the really bad writing that sometimes hampers these wrestlers.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, hopefully this isn't too far off topic, but with all the releases that have been coming lately, I feel like WWE's roster is dwindling to the point that I hope we're not too far away from maybe them just abandoning this whole brand split thing and combining the roster, and maybe next year we could have a true Survivor Series of baby faces versus heels, and I feel like fans would honestly get a lot more invested in that than brand versus brand.
When I watch the All-Star game in baseball, I root for the National League because my team is in the National League and I want to see the National League win. There's nothing on the line, but there's loyalty to one or the other. In WWE, these men and women bounce back and forth between the two shows so often, and WWE wants you to watch both shows. Like it doesn't mean anything to the fans. I can't imagine there's a fan out there that goes, man, I love Raw. I can't stand SmackDown. I so want Raw to win. No one feels that way, and the talent once a year have to pretend like they feel that way. So, yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think that Survivor Series style matches themselves, I'm fine for champion versus champion. I like the brand split in general because it gives more people opportunities. But the idea of which brand reigns supreme, that doesn't cut it in modern wrestling anymore. I don't think anyone cares.
No, not at all.
And with that, folks, that is Survivor Series 2021. Thank you for staying up late. If you're watching on the East Coast, like where I am at, you are now past midnight, so we are going to let you go. I'll just give you some programming notes, though, to tell you we have some great content coming up. There are only 2 more shows this year of the Two Bros Wrestling Show before we take our annual holiday hiatus, and then when we come back in January, we're going to come back and do our annual award show like we did last year. So it'll be the second one of those, and so we got a lot of good things coming up. We have made a change in our schedule, though. So next week on the Two Bros Wrestling Show, we were originally going to do our show of Ring of Honor. That's an evergreen topic. It's still going to be a hot topic as to the future of Ring of Honor going into next year. We're going to hold that show until next year so that we can shift things around. Since NXT decided to drop a pay-per-view on us at the last minute, we want to make sure that we cover that on December 5th. So next week's show, we're going to kick off the holidays by giving away some gifts to the world of professional wrestling. So you'll want to stay tuned for that. That'll be back at our regular time at 8 o'clock. On Facebook, we'll be live. If you can watch us on 8 o'clock Eastern time on Facebook, or watch us on a replay on either Facebook or YouTube. David, thank you for staying up late and watching the Survivor Series and filling in while Doug does his gobbledygook or work down at the mall.
Thanks again for having me. I love being an honorary third bro.
Friend of the show always. Thank you, my friend. Thank all of you for joining us. Join us again next week. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving and a good week. Take care, everyone.